Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC Guy. Well, today I've got a number of things that I've got to share with you here on the DCC Guy. First of all, we're going to go back and take a look at some things that I did on the lift-out bridge last week to answer some of your questions. And then I'm going to give you an alternate approach to providing power to the approach tracks for the bridge itself. So we'll take a look at that. And then I have a number of things that I want to share with you. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we go on, I want to ask you to hit that little red subscribe button. And when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with a couple of housekeeping chores. Now, right now there are about 35,000 subscribers to this channel, and there's only one of me. And I'm having considerable difficulty these days keeping up with just reading the comments and emails that I get from you, let alone answering each and every one of them. So there are several things that I want to ask you to do. And the first thing is, a lot of the comments that I get can easily be answered by just watching the entire video. Last week I got questions from people about where they could purchase the PowerPoints. And I had explicitly said in the video, in the US, Iron Planet Hobbies sells them. And yet people ask me, where can I get these products? So please, watch the entire video. And I try to answer just about all of the questions that I can think are important. So if you watch the video, you'll usually get an answer to your question. Now, one alternative that I can suggest is if you have a complex question concerning a product you have, contact the company that made it. They have tech support people that they pay to answer these questions. And in many cases, they are much more knowledgeable about this stuff than I am. And they get questions all the time and might have seen something that I haven't and can easily answer your question. Now, another alternative that you have is there is an internet site called groups.io. That's groups.io. And there are just tons of forums on there. And most of the major companies are represented there with a forum. You got a Lokesound question, go to the Lokesound forum. Decoder Pro, they've got one there. Digitrax, there's one there. So in many cases, you can go there, ask your question on the forum, and get an answer much faster than I'm going to be able to provide it to you. Finally, in many cases, I will get the same question in comments from several different people. And that was true with last week's video. A number of people kept asking, what about Keep Alives? What do you do about Keep Alives? Well, instead of answering all 6 or 7 or however many of you asked that same question, I simply put one answer in a comment that I made and pinned it at the top of the list of comments. So please look for a pinned comment at the top of the list of comments. Okay, let's take a look at the micro switch and how it's wired. So this is the micro switch here. I think I probably got this from allelectronics.com. They're very inexpensive. On the side here, they have 2 contacts labeled normally open and normally closed. Now, in a normally closed position, the switch would be powered. Normally open, it's not powered. This is the common connection. So what I have done here is I've run a wire from the DCC power bus that connects to the outer rails on the rest of the layout. So I've run that power into here, and then it comes out here. And then I have 2 wires coming out here. One wire that goes back under the layout and is connected to these 2 rails on the layout. These are the approach rails. 2 feet back that way, these are cut. So those rails are physically and electrically isolated from the rest of the layout. They are only powered when this switch is closed, like that. When the bridge is in place, it closes the switch and provides power to these 2 rails. And that means when the bridge is out, these rails are not powered. Trains entering the last 2 feet of track here will stop because there's no power for them. unless they have a keep alive, which several people ask about. And in those cases, you have to determine, as the layout designer, how long of an approach track you need to isolate in order to prevent them from running off the edge of the world here. I can, if I need to, increase this. I can go back, cut more gaps, 3 feet, 6 feet, however far I need to go back. I can do that and just increase the length of this approach track and dead zone. Couldn't be any simpler than that, folks. And in just a minute, I'll show you an alternative way that you can power the approach rails. So let's take a look at that. Okay, now that we've taken a look at how to wire the actual micro switch, I want to go over this other approach shown in this diagram. And it uses a magnetic sensor. So it's got, as you can see up here on the top, at the lift-out bridge, there are 2 sensors that have been installed here. And in this case, what they do is there's a magnet installed on the bridge itself opposite the sensor. So whenever the bridge is in place, it turns the sensor on, and that triggers a switch in this Cobalt Rex device that DCC Concepts makes, and that turns on a relay. And it can do several things, and we'll talk about that in a second. So basically then, this sensor is simply an on-off switch triggered by the presence of a magnet. And all you need is a little super magnet to go with this to turn it on and off. So it can be a hinged bridge like shown in this diagram, and you can have this bridge that flips over using hinges, or in my case, I simply had one that lifts out. But as long as you've got a magnet on the bridge, whenever the bridge is in place, it's going to trigger the sensor, and it will do things via the switches built in to the Cobalt Rex. And when the bridge is lifted out, it's going to turn the circuit off, and something else will happen. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So it's a very slick, easy method. It means that you don't have to go through the wiring for the micro switch itself and have to deal with that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the diagram a little bit closer here. So you can see what happens is, as I said, when the bridge is lifted, it triggers this little sensor and controls what happens here on this Cobalt Rex device shown in the center. And they have a good description of everything it can do. But basically it has relays in here, which are basically an on-off switch, so it can turn them on and off. And it can use those contacts then to control whether or not the approach tracks on the layout and the bridge itself have power applied to them. Now, that can come in very handy. It can be used instead of the micro switch that I showed you, or in place of using the PowerPoint setup that I showed you in a similar diagram to this in last week's video. So I suggest you take a look back at that. And I try to leave these things up long enough so that you can do a screen capture to get a copy of this particular diagram, and the one I did the same thing last week. So go back and take a look in that video for the similar diagram, and you can see how this would replace the PowerPoint connection that turns power on and off to the approach tracks at the bridge. Now, another neat thing about this, you can see here that on the Cobalt Rex device, there are wires that go out to the layout and provide power to the various tracks. Now, of course, you could use this in combination with PowerPoints to provide power to the bridge itself instead of having a flexible pair of wires connected to the bridge and to the tracks. But that's just 2 different ways that you could handle this. Another thing that you can use, because there are 4 different sets of relays in the Cobalt Rex device, that means not only can you control your track power, you can control things like a signal on the layout. You could have a signal set up on the layout that would be green when the bridge is down, and that would go red when the bridge is up to signal your engineers to stop their trains. You could have flashing LEDs that are controlled by the Rex, and all of that is covered in the instructions that come with the Cobalt Rex device. And you can go to the dccconcepts.com website and look up the Rex and download a copy of the instructions for that to see what's involved. Now listen close. These are available from Iron Planet Hobbies in the U.S. They don't have a lot of them. So if several of you guys suddenly descend on Iron Planet Hobbies and order these, they're going to run out and they're going to have to reorder. So be aware of that. If you don't get there first, you're not likely to get one. So the same thing happened last week. As soon as the video was out, they sold out of the PowerPoints and had to place an order. So they do have the PowerPoints on order. More will be coming. They do have a few of the Cobalt Rex and a few of these magnetic sensors. Now I will tell you, the sensors sell for around $12 in the US. The Cobalt Rex sells for around $20 in the US. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive option than the micro switch, but it allows you to control many other things besides just turning the power on and off to the approach track. As I said, it could be used for signals, it could be used for flashing LEDs, it could be used for anything else that you can turn power on and off with using a switch. And that's basically what the Cobalt Rex does. Let me go ahead and get back here on the desktop or on the benchtop, and I'll show you what the magnetic sensors and the Rex device look like. Now this is one of the magnetic detectors shown in that diagram, and they come in a package. I think this is a package of 4. I think they offer these in a pack in other sizes as well. Take a look at their website, or the Iron Planet Hobbies website. I know he has some of these listed there as well. I checked yesterday. This particular one is DCP-TMS. Now, as you can see, they're very small. All you have to do, as shown in that diagram, drill a small hole in the end of your layout, insert that in it, put a little glue of adhesive of some kind to hold it in place, and then just take one of these little super magnets, and I got a number of these from allelectronics.com. They're fairly inexpensive. And then you glue that to the end of your bridge, and when you lift it out or put it in, it activates the sensor built in here to this little device. And it's got these 2 wires that then connect to the Rex device. So they would be connected in here in these screw terminals. And that was shown in the diagram. Okay. Then this device here, and I believe this sells here, I think Iron Planet Hobbies has these for $19.23 the last time I looked, and these were around $12 for, I believe, either a package of 2 or 4. I can't remember. Check that yourselves. But at any rate, these are powered using either DC or DCC power, and there's a screw terminal right here that you can connect it to. So if you've got a DC power bus on your layout, you can use that to operate it, or you could operate it off of your DCC power bus. And then it has several slide switches that determine how the relays function, whether they're going to function as normally closed or a normally open switch. And there's one slider on each side for each set of relays. There are 4 relays built into this device, and the wires to them would be connected here and here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of contacts for what you want to control. And then the detector would be connected right here. So there's a left, a common, and a right. So you could connect one of these magnets or magnetic detectors here, and it could control all 4 of these relays simultaneously if you had 4 devices or functions that you wanted to activate. And this little slider right here in the middle, it controls whether or not they operate as a gang of 4 or as 2 pairs. So you can't use them individually, but you can use 2 and 2 or all 4 simultaneously. So this is where you would attach, as I said, the magnetic detector, and then this is where you would attach the wires going to the isolated sections of track on your layout. You could attach wires here going to your signal lights on the layout so that it would normally be green when the bridge is in place, and it would go red when you take your bridge out, signaling your engineers to stop their trains so that they won't run off the edge of the world. And you can do that for two different sides. So you could have other functions here that you might want to control. You could have signal lights here, and you could have a bell operated off of this one, something of that nature. Or you could have flashing LEDs operating as well at the end of the track. So there's a number of different ways that you could use these with the 4 different relays or with the 2 different ones separate. And as I said, they operate off of DC power or DCC power. So it gives you 2 options, 2 different ways to use these, and this is one of the reasons why I am a strong proponent of having a DC power bus on your model railroad in addition to a DCC power bus. And I did videos on both, on installing a DC power bus as well as a DCC power bus. So go back and take a look at those videos. Okay, so that's a look at the magnetic sensor in the REX device. Now I'm not going to be installing these for the lift-out bridge now because I've already got the micro switch in place, but I will hold on to these and we will be using these in another installation coming down the road. So look for this in a future video. And what I want to show you next are these small Cobalt SS switch motors. Somebody asked me in the comments last week about options for controlling points on turnouts from the top of the layout so that you don't have to install your IP digitals or your tortoise switch machines on top. What are some options? Well, here you go. Right here they are. This is about 1 inch long, 1/2 inch across. It's about 11 millimeters high. So it's a fairly compact little device. These are designed to sit right alongside, to be installed alongside of your turnout, and they use a micromotor instead of a solenoid to throw the points. And they are operated by this controller board right here. And it has a number of options, a number of features with it. They come with this single expansion cable so that you can extend it out much further, because I think you're going to need more than the 6 inches or so in order to attach it to your layout. They also offer this other one here, which has multiple connectors on it. So you can use one output to control more than one of these switch motors. For example, you might have a crossover where you want to control the points on 2 turnouts, and you would need 2 point motors to do that. These would do the job, and these are what you would use to connect them. They have 2 connectors and 2 circuits on each one of these control boards. So you can attach one here, and you can attach another one on this side over here. Then they have a number of other features. These are operated using either DC or DCC power, like many of the DCC Concepts products, and you just connect the 2 wires here from your DC power bus or your DCC power bus, and then they can be controlled using a number of different options. And this fold-out sheet right here goes into considerable depth. It's quite detailed as to how you can control it. You can use push buttons, any type of thing of that nature, in order to operate each side of the board and control them. You can set the length of throw right here using these adjustments, because these do move in and out, and you need to adjust them for the exact length of throw on your installation. And they have a number of other features here that I would ask that you take a look. You can go to the DCC Concepts website, look up Cobalt SS, and download a copy of this manual and read it, because it is an extensive fold-out, several pages of instructions on how to use these. So considerable detail comes with it, and also you can download it and get all of the information up front as to how well this is going to fit in your model railroad. So particularly if you're looking for the capability to install switch machines on top of the layout alongside of your turnouts, here is one option for you, as opposed to installing your Cobalt IP digitals or your tortoise switch machines upside down like I did on the staging yard installation on the Piedmont Southern a year or so ago. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. I hope what I showed you on the lift-out bridge on wiring the micro switch cleared up all the questions that you had about that. And also you might want to take a look at the alternative approach that I showed you using the little magnet switches along with the DCC Concepts Rex relay device that will allow you not only to power the approach tracks selectively, but also to provide signals and flashing LEDs, anything like that that can be turned on and off with a relay switch. So that's all for this week. Have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.